we are going to be diving into yet another scenario ripe with the undead or infected or whatever you want to call them, because this time around today's zombie outbreak's name is a bit freaky. And for once, I won't complain about doing another zombie scenario, and we'll actually just cut into the subject matter at hand, but not before saying this week we are looking at the I Want to Ride My Bicycle Bubsy's Guide to the Zombie Apocalypse I Am Legend called It Wants Its Vampires Back, Hyper Mutant Adult Zombies, Send Newts, the Tide Pod Gorillas, they're not zombies, they're infected, If Norman Reedus had a game about zombies that wasn't complete tripe, Wolves and Crows and Bears, oh my, game itself. This week we are telling you why you wouldn't survive Days Gone's zombie apocalypse. Stemming from a laboratory located in Iron Butte, Oregon, a rare one-of-a-kind flower had been growing under the extensive analytical microscope of dozens of scientific minds. But the exact purpose and properties of the flower's intent were never fully disclosed to the team. That was until one research intern, David Gorman, began to pry and investigate what was truly going on. Attempting to convince his colleague Sarah Whitaker of a potential conspiracy, he was told that it wasn't worth the trouble. Despite Sarah's better judgment, David broke into the lab and stole a sample of the virus that he had been working on. But unbeknownst to him, David accidentally infected himself in the process and had become an unknowing carrier. Making a grand escape, he fled to Portland to attend an environmental convention in order to expose the research lab to the world. However, during his travels and wading through thousands of people at this massive gathering, David had passed on the infection to anyone that drew close to him or the things that he had touched, coughed on, or sneezed on, or even pissed on. Aim correctly at the turlet, fellas. This virus was highly, and I mean highly contagious. I mean, if Snoop Dogg and Willie Nelson were two strains of infectious virus, they wouldn't come close to how high this infection rate is. Spreading through the air to a short degree, bodily fluids, direct contact as the virus could stay on surfaces for elongated periods of time, and of course through bites and scratches. When the convention had come to a close, these people dispersed from Portland across the country and even the world, being harbingers for this virus. The strain violently mutated where it doesn't transmit through the air anymore, but it was already too late. Within these hosts, it became more similar to the rabies virus, but with more transmissive, transformative, mind-altering, and deadly results. And over the span of only 14 days, billions of people had rapidly succumbed to the infection, spiraling the world into chaos and allowing martial law to reign. Even in the first week, half of the world's population was either outright dead or infected. Due to the malicious nature of the infection, those with either weakened or lowered immune systems or non-fully developed immune systems were among those who outright died before the virus could manipulate their nervous system and brain activity, meaning children at the age of 12 and under and the elderly in their 60s and later would quickly die out, as some scientists describe this horrific phenomenon as their bodies not being able to handle the infection's mutations at the cellular level. Those that did survive, well, it could be easily said that death was a much more desirable outcome for them and those around them, for they were completely changed into the infected, known as the Freakers. Akin to the infected of 28 Days Later, and more importantly Left 4 Dead, and eventually I Am Legend, they are still infected people that need to breathe, eat, drink, and all the other necessities of being a living, breathing human, with all the same weaknesses as humans who need their vital organs and brain functions, but also with the added bonus of rapidly evolving in short periods of time. Unlike the infected of Left 4 Dead and 28 Days Later, who will just viciously attack survivors with no motive and then mindlessly roam about until they will eventually die from either malnourishment, exhaustion, or dehydration. The Freakers of Days Gone do have some semblance of self-preservation and will not only eat human flesh like a generic zombie, but also eat any available food and drink any water nearby, allowing them to survive for years to come. This is where the events of Days Gone begin to take place 2 years after day one of the pandemic. It is in this post-apocalyptic wasteland that our main protagonist, Deacon, must face the varying forms of the Freakers as well as psychopathic survivors as he scours the landscape to survive while searching for his long-lost wife. Now, I usually discuss the story a little more, but there's not much to the story outside of just trying to find a cure and fighting the infection. We have discussed time and time again how humanity will descend into unruly mayhem once law and order have been thrown out the window. It's a tried and true method of any zombie story. But in this case, we won't discuss factions like the Rippers, as those are independent variables of society that have nothing to do with the actual freakers themselves. Although the fictional organization of Nero would act in a similar fashion to the CDC or the WHO or any number of government organizations. But when it comes down to it, and if you somehow weren't among the first people and animals that were unknowingly infected and escaped the chaos of the pandemic's onset, you would have a lot set out before you to hinder your chances at survival. Now, the infected known as freakers or hooligans can be seen in a whole lot of different forms and can be transformed by this virus in the stage 1 version of what are called swarmers, making them violently aggressive, nearly feral in nature, and adapt to a more cannibalistic diet. It will also see to covering the body in lesions and bloody pustules while also making the host go through hair loss, as if everyone were a main character in Breaking Bad. Since this particular virus was being bioengineered for militaristic purposes, it's easy to see why the mutations of the disease would give enhanced strength, agility, dexterity, and speed, being able to outrun anyone not physically adept enough to follow the simple rule of cardio. They can also overpower most normal and unarmed people, allowing them to sink their teeth in, or at least maul you a wee bit, most likely meaning your demise, either by being eaten alive or beaten to death, or becoming infected. Being able to genetically spread through bites and scratches is one thing, but the fact that no one person could be a carrier of the virus for once and not being immune, considering the 100% infection rate, is a whole other story. Most zombie scenarios have that slim chance, even if it's 0.01%, that you could either be immune to the virus or that you could be an asymptomatic carrier of the virus, but Days Gone decided to say fuck it and said, nah, you're just going to become one if you get bit. You aren't entering the genetic lottery on this one. Now, they aren't the most dim-witted of creatures either, and will retain some modicum of their former selves and see to changing their clothing and mess around with tools and utensils. But beyond their superhuman capabilities and strength, speed, and basic animalistic intelligence are their more profoundly terrifying trait. Swarmers prefer to travel and gather in large swarms, which is the most plausible reasoning to how the remaining surviving populace was wiped out, forcing the remnants of humanity to hide in the wildlands of the world outside of normal human civilization. With the infection originally taking hold of thousands during the initial outbreak, many freakers would find themselves together and without much purpose once they had either devoured the flesh of or infected every healthy survivor left nearby. They began to roam as they flocked outwards from metropolitan areas to search for more food, moving as a unit that once it has discovered a target, will act in a similar fashion to a disturbed beehive and congregate on a victim en masse, destroying, ascending, and getting past anything in their way, maneuvering in a similar fashion to the zombies of the movie version of World War Z, climbing over and on top of each other to get to higher ground. They can be killed just as easily as any other human, destroy a vital organ, shoot through the heart, make them lose enough blood, or of course, the tried and true method of shooting them in the head or destroying the brain. While it might seem achievable to gun down or blow up dozens of them at once like Deacon, for regular average Joes that aren't gun-toting rednecks, a majority of us would be screwed as they would come at you like a tsunami. Now, it could be said that pure instinct drives them to gather in droves, but it can also be stated that these creatures secrete pheromones that attract each other from far distances. These pheromones could also be integral in scouting out healthy survivors, somewhat like the Walking Dead's walkers, who are able to discern the difference between the living and the dead purely through smell. They are most active during the night as they prefer the guise of darkness, considering during most daytime hours, freakers and most of its variations will be found in caves and abandoned buildings hibernating, but will not hesitate to attack in broad daylight if given the chance or awoken. So they aren't going to be afraid of a little vitamin D, unlike I Am Legend's vampire-like beings. But due to this, they are still easily susceptible to being temporarily blinded by sunlight at first or by flashlights and fireworks. If allowed to exist long enough, or if they have any pre-existing conditions or lifestyle choices, some swarmers will evolve further into a more deadly or generally annoying to combat creature, such as the bleachers. No, not the place where you would go to either smoke weed or make out with your friends in high school. No, the bleachers, who have undergone further mutations in terms of strength and speed, pretty similar to their swarmer brethren in terms of attack patterns, but will tend to act as loners with a bit more uncontrolled speed. and with a rougher and thicker hide to withstand more damage from external sources. For those who barely made it over the age restriction and somehow were not outright killed by the infection's ravages of the body, those between the ages of 10 to 14 would have their body frame and adolescent minds mutated into newts. Crawling about on all fours and finding ease in scaling vertical surfaces, these infected of smaller stature will usually stay amongst themselves, fearing regular freakers. Newts will grunt and squeal and seemingly be passive as you approach their proximity, staying at a higher ground. Of course, they're going to be screaming at you, but for a large majority of people, having to shoot these young infected can prove to be too much, seeing them as someone else's child. The newts will use your hesitation as you debate your own morality to have some of the pack stealthily strike you to disarm and disorient you. Once you have been weakened, the newt flock will simultaneously see to swarming you for a veritable trick or treat of your internal organs. Women will also find themselves in the ratio of people who are likely to mutate to a rarer version of the freakers, known as the screamer. Oh boy, zombie games sure like using the archetype and name of the screamer. Seemingly malnourished and frail at first sight, she doesn't seem like much of a threat, but due to the unique mutations that the hooligan virus made to her vocal cords, lung capacity, hearing capabilities, and even the lengthening of her jaws, usually standing still to better hear the sound of possible survivors, once she has spotted a healthy survivor, will screech at supersonic volumes in order to rupture the eardrums of survivors into a state of shell shock. This loud burst of sound will also ring the attention of swarmers in the immediate area to descend on you while you're trying to get your bearings, and you're basically just sitting there with your hands on your ears freaking out. Taking quite a reach amongst the swarmers could possibly be the reachers, probably amongst the most evolved and deadly of the freakers, who can run at speeds of up to 40 miles per hour, donning razor-sharp claws to quickly slit your throat, cut you to ribbons, or puncture your body repeatedly, leading to bleed out before you can even succumb to the infection it spreads, while developing gorilla-like hair growth. This guy is going to be a little too much for you to handle even if you have the best weapons at your disposal. And what kind of zombie-like epidemic would it be if there wasn't a roided-out musclehead to knock you on your ass? The breaker being the results of the virus manipulating either high levels of male testosterone or metabolic steroids. I feel like I've heard this before. Much like men with over-the-top levels of either testosterone or steroids in their system, these bruiser types will be prone to anger-fueled outbursts and can even be seen to attack other freakers, ripping them limb from limb. Literally. And since freakers are just hardened people, it's safe to say if this roided out monkey got a hold of you, you would end up just a torso that he used for his own personal round of disc golf. The increased muscle mass of the breaker gives it increased durability against all types of weaponry, and could be a decent enough bullet sponge as it absorbs your ammo supply and bulldozes through your defenses like the out-of-control bear it is. Speaking of bears, human freakers can also pass on their infection to animals such as bears, wolves, bats, and even crows. Runners are your run-of-the-mill rabies-infected wolves, traveling in packs and, well, running a bit faster thanks to the mutations of the hooligan virus. Even being able to keep up with the basic speed of a motorcycle. If you think you can take on an overly aggressive pack of wolves, be my guest. Just remember, one bite and you're screwed. Overhead, crows can become the criers, flying together in flocks to dive bomb you in an annoying flurry of beaks and feathers. Trying to disperse them will be difficult enough, as they're just these tiny specks that you're trying to shoot by the hordeful, and they are crowing loudly at you, pecking at you, pissing you off, and you're trying to shoot back in anger. And while you're doing that, you'll probably draw attention your way from any nearby human freakers because you're trying to shoot at birds. And the most barely legal threat of the freaker army are the rager bears. It goes without saying that, well, unless you have some impressive buckshot by the barrelful, even a regular bear is hard enough to take down if you don't aim right. Bears normally aren't ones to seek confrontation, being solely territorial and protective of their young unless hungry. But once they have become infected and become a rager bear, will actively seek to attack anything it can, while also being mutated with a thicker hide hide, more brutal strength, and a heightened sense of hearing. I don't think Leonardo DiCaprio is going to be able to take this one down. Now, with the Freakers taking control of vicious animals, millions of humans, and mutating them further to hunt you down and decimate you, you're going to need to be able to quietly execute them periodically, or else you could face the wrath of any number of these threats. But most interesting and terrifying of all is that the virus will not always make a person a mindless cretin with the simple goals of destruction, consumption, and infection. No. In what is seen in the secret ending of the game, which spoilers, if you didn't achieve that or don't want to be spoiled, might want to click off as I'm speaking now and go to this timestamp. I'm going to give you a little bit of time. Okay, time's up. Amongst the original intents to weaponize this virus and reverberating the ideals of survival of the fittest, intelligent freakers have been shown to exist. These I Am Legend-like people will still be infected, being able to jump great distances, climb tall surfaces, and be stronger than the average human, but will still be able to retain their sense of humanity and intelligence, meaning, for some reason, those that have found the means can utilize the virus to not only withstand the rabies-like mind alterations, but utilize the more advantageous parts of the hooligan virus, the only notable negative effects being the loss of hair and more freaker-like appearance. So we're going to have highly intelligent infected being able to do whatever they wished with the strengths that all the freakers have at their disposal. So while we are toiling away fighting against one another as other healthy humans try to kill each other over territory and resources, and while the infected are knocking at our doors, government agencies are making superhumans with an unknown goal. Are they being created to wipe out humans and freakers alike to initiate the dawn of a new hybrid race? Or could they be seeking to help us with their newly developed physique and genetics? Only time and a possible sequel can tell. So with all that being said, in terms of our own survival, if the freaker/hooligan virus were to ever break out in a real-world setting, well, most of us would be screwed and not even know it. A lot of us would be infected within the first 2 weeks and would either become dead bodies on the streets or freakers going freaky on the streets. For those of you who haven't even reached your teenage years, which thanks to Kappa, please get the hell off my video so I can continue to make content on this platform, damn it. And for the 2.7% of my elderly viewers who are probably just 13-year-olds saying they were born in 1920 to avoid age restrictions, you young and elderly folk will be DOA and not stand a chance within even the first 2 weeks of this outbreak. The sheer massive death toll and infected count alone would be too much to handle in the ensuing riots and chaos that cities would fall into. It's possible that numerous military units had been infected before the outbreak, so armed response could have been shaved down to a mere fraction of what it could have been, meaning they were overwhelmed pretty quickly. Taking up arms as civilians once government and military intervention failed would be your only means of survival. And even then, near the beginning, you'll need a heavily fortified safe haven with plenty of people and plenty of hand sanitizer to prevent infection and break-ins from the overly strong and numerous amounts of freakers. Having a decent stockpile of weapons, ammunition, and other means of murdering the ghouls with a steady supply of food and water would be ideal. But as I can't stress enough, the fact that you will be outnumbered 100 to 1 or even more than that would mean you could put up a decent fight, but you would either run out of whatever deadly supplies you have, or they would just maul through whatever you had and destroy you. Finding a good hiding spot would also be another countermeasure, but over time, the freakers will be seeking the darkness of buildings and caves to hibernate, and will most likely accidentally stumble upon your encampment and eat you alive. They will exhaust all nearby resources, since they will literally be eating anything they can find, from berries to animals to perishables to even humans. So good luck scavenging for food. Developing settlements aren't really feasible in the context of how this outbreak is. And honestly, the villages and camps you encounter throughout the game should not have lasted the 2 years that they did in the Days Gone universe. But hey, whatever makes for a good open-world zombie RPG. The only real chances of even surviving Days Gone's zombie apocalypse would either mean you would have to be an absolute badass with plot armor thick enough to ward off any possible bites or scratches, on top of a knack for firearms, homemade explosives, and a keen sense of stealth, or that you were subjected to military augmentations of the virus that allowed you to pretty much be a superhuman. Either option is pretty unfeasible. Being like Deacon from Days Gone would require years of experience in outdoor outdoor survival, and tactical know-how. And it's basically safe to say you aren't becoming an intelligent freaker unless your dad works for the Nintendo equivalent of bioweapons distributors. I mean, don't take this as a count of terrorism or anything. You know what? Just let's get to the end of the video. Now, if you enjoyed this look at the Days Gone zombie infected apocalypse, you know the generic YouTuber drill. Like, sub, and all that jazz. Comment what I said wrong, or tell me how I sound like Neil from Family Guy. Donate to my Patreon to support me to be featured here. I do very much appreciate the support for the channel. And if you have any suggestions for future Why You Wouldn't Survive or Zombie Sense content, let me know in the comments too. Days Gone was a highly requested topic for a while, and so is the SCP containment outbreach, but holy shit, is that going to be a long-ass video to cover. So bear with me as I try to get the information together for that one. I want to make it a long video and do it all in one go, like I did with Dead by Daylight. Anyways, until next time, I'm Zackass, aka Wow Such Gaming. Stay well!